Hello, everybody. Welcome to Perf Racing in Chicago, presented by Peter O'Malley and Ann Michaud, and hosted by Crowley's Yachtapalooza 2021. My name is Bill Tate, and I'll be moderating this seminar. So Peter O'Malley of Midwest Open Racing Fleet will discuss racing opportunities utilizing the Performance Handicap Racing Formula or Fleet, PERF rating system. PERF is an easy point of entry for the novice racer. Peter will discuss racing opportunities and show you how you can get involved in racing in a low stress, high enjoyment way. Preparation prior to starting your first race, the mechanics of buoy racing itself, and a myriad of other topics will be discussed. So just a little housekeeping. Same from this morning's seminars if you've attended any of those. All the seminars we presented here before a live audience and broadcast via Zoom. We will be recording all the seminars today and we'll post them on Crowley's Yacht Yard YouTube channel for later in this week. Please hold your questions till the end. For those of you online, I'll be monitoring over to the side there about a chat window and I will repeat the questions. And for anybody in the audience here that has questions, just hold the questions till the end and we'll go from there. So let me introduce the presenters. Peter O'Malley has been racing keelboats in Chicago for 12 years. While starting as a novice crew member, he is now a racing skipper of an Olsen 34 and the Commodore of the Midwest Open Racing Fleet. He has experienced both networking as a crew member as well as selecting race crew for his team. He has invited every friend, most coworkers, and many strangers out racing and can't fathom why they have other priorities. Me too. He firmly believes that sailing and bourbon are the two things that are good for the soul. And I don't know if you want to say something about yourself.
Sure. Hi, all. I'm Ann Michaud. I am also a racer here in Chicago. I race One Design and Perf Racing, actually, both. And I'm also a U.S. Coast Guard licensed captain and have been sailing here in the Great Lakes apparently 18 years. I read Peter updated my bio, so that was nice. It also made me feel a little bit old, but yeah, and nice to meet everyone. Thanks for coming in person. Hopefully we've got some viewers online too.
All right, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about some safety equipment for those of you who are new to racing and maybe haven't been sailing much or racing much. We'll talk about the basic elements of a race, simple right-of-way rules, fundamentals about handicapping. That's what our title of our presentation is about PERF and the Performance Handicap Rating Race Fleet, and then some racing venues where PERF and handicap rules are employed. So before we get into all of that, can we hear, and sorry for anybody listening online, but can we hear a little bit about you guys sitting in the crowd, or if you are watching online, if you want to send a message and we'll report out. You guys tell us about yourselves. Anybody want to volunteer? Hands up. Go ahead. Shout. Okay, so we've got a veteran here. Are you a boat owner or a crew? 125.5. All right, thank you. Yeah. How about you guys? What you?
Okay, we're past four racers from 1980 to 1983 and 10 years. We had the slowest boat in the fleet. Oh, I'm sorry. We had the slowest boat in the fleet, which actually brought a lot of boats out because people are kind of hesitant to go out sailing because they don't want to get blown away. And believe me, they might seem like they're amateurs, but there are some really good racers here. But really, if you got a sailboat, if you want to really learn sailing, you got to race. That's the only way you're going to get better. I don't know. Thank you. How's that for a plug?
All right, I won't make the crew of Esprit introduce themselves since we're standing with one here. But we have some other members of Morph sitting with us in the crowd as well. All right, so safety equipment, and this is going to be pretty simple, but we want to be able to kind of vamp with you guys. If you have questions about things, raise your hand. Type it in on the Zoom meeting, whatever, and we'll talk about that. But so I've posted up just some simple personal safety gear. Primarily focused on crew, people who maybe haven't been racing before. And what we focus on, what I focus on when I bring new crew out on the boat is your points of contact, which are your hands and your feet. First of all, is having good shoes. And you don't have to go out. I have Zeke sailing shoes pictured on the slide. They don't need to be sailing shoes. Tennis shoes are fine. You want non-marking soles, something that's going to grip a little bit. You don't want to be out there in your flip-flops or your leather sole dress shoes from your day at the office or whatever. You just want regular good athletic shoes. The other thing that new racers might not be aware of is that these ropes have a lot of load on them, and if you let go of the wrong one the wrong way, you're going to burn your hands. So we recommend, even for somebody who's brand new, to go ahead and purchase a set of sailing gloves. You can get them here. They run $25, $30 for a basic set. And they will save you from having a bad day on the water the first time you touch a line. One of the other key components, this policy will vary by boat, but you should have a PFD. Some boats will provide a PFD for you. That's a personal flotation device or a life jacket. Others will require that you bring your own. But I recommend that you have your own because no one knows your equipment like you do. And while you should be able to trust your skipper to provide safety equipment that's reliable, this is something that's it's for your own safety, for your own good. It's a good thing to invest in. Now, an inflatable PFD costs a few $100. You don't need to go out and buy it before your first race. You might take one of the boats for your first few times out, or you might have a simpler foam one. You can get for $30 or $40. So it's can be pretty simple equipment that that's really necessary if you're going to spend serious time on the water, especially if you're going to get into racing situations that aren't the 75-degree sunny day with a mild breeze. Those first thunderstorms or heavy wind days, it's a nice peace of mind to have good gear like that. And then the last thing I have pictured here is a sailing knife. This is, again, a little bit more, maybe you don't need it your first time out. But in situations on the boat that can get a little bit hairier, if you're in a situation where you are attached to the boat and don't want to be, it's good to have that as your kind of your last resort to cut yourself free. It's also a useful tool on the boat, just to undo shackles, to cut lines, to cut tape, whatever. It's the multi-tool or the sailing knife. It does a lot of things. What we're not showing here is safety equipment for the boat. For anybody who is a skipper, whether you've been racing or not, you need when you're taking other people out on your boat, you're responsible for their safety. They're responsible for themselves, but you're responsible for them as well. So the systems need to be in good order. You need to have your VHF and know how to use it, know how to make a distress call if it ever came to that. And even independent of equipment, you want to be doing some training, doing man overboard drills, teaching your crew where safety equipment is located, fire extinguishers, things like that. So as you bring people in a crew situation out on a race boat, not everybody knows your boat the way you do, and it's your responsibility to teach your crew where that safety equipment is and how to use it. It won't be something they learn overnight, so it's great to do drills and keep that learning going, and especially in situations where you might be the person who's incapacitated, you need to have other people on your boat who know what to do, who know how to bring the boat around and get you back on the boat, or make that distress call to the Coast Guard and know how to handle the equipment. Anything else you want to add?
Sure. So, a lot of us in this particular group, we've heard about your experience, and I know about that half of the crowd's experience. But for anyone that happens to be listening online, These things do, I mean, we want sailing to be fun, and it most of the time is, but the occasional times it isn't is pretty horrific. And my crew and we had a great race last summer, came back to the dock, and we had to listen to somebody that did not know how to make a distress call. And it's the most heartbreaking thing to hear. Teach the people that come on your boat where the radio is. We post information about that right next to the radio. We also actually, before our MAC, we put together lists and we've laminated them. But thanks to Judith, she gets them all laminated, all of our safety instructions. So everybody knows how to engage the man overboard on the various different devices on board. The new radios, the DSC radios, have that functionality built in. If you're going to be racing in the Great Lakes and if you're going to be doing any of the distance races, that's all going to be something you're going to want to have on board and definitely know how to use and teach your crew how to use it. 5 minutes at the start of a race can be a huge, huge game changer, and not to have to listen to that call.
All right, great. All right, so we're talking about sailboat racing, and it sounds like our audience here has done some sailboat racing in their lifetime. Some of them have done a lot of sailboat racing in their lifetimes. But we're going to walk through some of the real basic stuff. So when we talk about a sailboat race has at least two things. It has a start line and a finish line, at the very least. And two boats, yeah. I think we've had races with one boat before. But what we do, speaking really about more Midwest Open Racing Fleet, we do mostly buoy races. And we do it on what's called an Olympic circle. So we have a series of 9 buoys off the shore of Burnham Harbor in Chicago, one in the center, and then 8 arranged in a circle. And so you see kind of our course map on the screen. And for a given race, we'll call a course around some series of those buoys. So we're showing a trapezoid course on the left and a windward leeward course on the right. And there are a bunch of different variations on these, and they can be oriented in any given way. But for the course on the left, we would start at SA7, that start finish line, go to Mark 1, go to Mark 8, then to 6. We keep 7 out of the way. It's shown on the screen, but it's not part of the course. Back to 8, then to 6, then down to 5, and up to SA7. The simpler windward leeward course just goes into the wind to 1, downwind to 5, back to 1, back to 5, and then finish. So those are simple orientations of a race course. Different organizations do different things. Like I said, we have an Olympic triangle with semi-permanent buoys that are out there on the water all summer. Other racing organizations might set up windward leeward courses where they'll do drop marks. They'll set up a boat out in the water, take another boat and drop an inflatable buoy a mile away, and you'll race to that buoy and back to the start. There's long distance races where you'll have like a port to port, where you might go from Chicago to St. Joseph, Michigan, as you do in the tri-state. Other long distance courses may go around government marks, permanent navigational aids that are out there on the water, and they're just, a race to nowhere, more or less, but just somewhere to go, somewhere to race. And these different kinds of courses, aside from being different shapes and different lengths, they require different tactics and strategies. So when we look at buoy racing, we're usually trying to orient ourselves based on the wind direction. So we'll start our races going straight upwind, and then we might go on a windward leeward course, we'll go right back downwind. Or on this trapezoid or an Olympic triangle, we'll have some reaching marks or reaching legs. So there's different orientations to that. And then finally you finish, and then you might have other races that day. You might have a regatta that has several races in a day. You might have just the one. There's a lot of variations on that depending on what racing venue or racing organization you sail with. So going into the start, we'll see what you guys want to talk about here. There's a lot of tactics that go into starting a sailboat race. For anyone who hasn't done it, it's not like we all line up on the line, like it's a 100-meter race and we, fire the gun and go. There's the starting sequence for a sailboat race is usually run by flags and sound signals. So this is a simple sequence that you'll see in a lot of venues. where you'll have a preparatory time 5 minutes out from your start, and there will be a signal. They'll raise a flag that indicates that your class is going to start 5 minutes from now. And then a minute after that, they'll raise another flag called the P flag that gives you the 4 minute warning. They'll take that down at the 1 minute warning. And then finally, they'll take down your class flag and you'll start. So your goal as a racer is to orient yourself close to the start line at full speed seconds before that starting signal. So if you do it right, you're 10 feet away from the start line, the sound goes off, and you're the first one over the line. If you do it wrong, well, there's a number of ways to do it wrong. You could be 100 yards away when that starting signal goes off. You could be on the wrong side of the line when that starting signal goes off. Now you got to start again because your first start wasn't valid. And not only are you doing this trying to time, your boat speed and the wind and wave conditions, you're also jockeying for position with other boats. So when you get to more advanced fleets that are good at tactics and good, know their boat handling, you'll see that you thought you had a great position at that start line, but somebody got in front of you or put you in a position where you couldn't quite get where you wanted to go.
That definitely happens. And I do some. I mentioned earlier I do some one design racing, and that does happen in the fleets. One design fleets. It happens in the perf fleets. But as Peter said, the goal is to get your boat and get going full speed, crossing the line right as the clock counts down to 0. It's a repetition thing. We use our watches. And we also have a clock at the back of the boat that's going off of GPS. We try to get everybody on the same page, so we're all able to make the boat go as fast as possible at the line, and we're not over early. Does happen occasionally. Sometimes there's a boat in the way. I don't know who, whatever. But it's all in good fun. It's, there people that don't race or haven't raced in a long time. A lot of times will come out. I've brought new people on the board and they're like, I didn't know how close together you would get. And I was like, well, yeah, we get pretty close together. Those of you that have been around a lot definitely know that. But in this particular area of Chicago that I've raced, I think that everybody, they want it to be fun. They don't want anybody to get hurt. We're all, things do occasionally happen, but for the most part, it's a really great organization and fun. It's meant to be a fun day on the water, while still getting there as fast as possible.
And one thing for those of you who are new to racing, don't expect to be good at the start on your first time out. It's a thing that you get accustomed to and that you get better at. But it's also something that intimidates a lot of new racers because you're reliant on these signal flags and these sounds. Sometimes if you're a new racer, if you're a new skipper, you also have a lot of new crew, so they also don't really know what they're doing yet. But this is a good opportunity, and something that Morph tries to do is bring new racers along and have those conversations at the bar after the race, bring you out on a more experienced boat as crew, so that when you go back to your boat as skipper, you have a better sense of how things run. But I would encourage you, if you are starting out and learning this, to learn together with your crew, because it's a lot of responsibility on the skipper to maintain the position of the boat and understand what's around them in terms of rights of way and who they have to stay out of the way of. It's helpful if you can rely on your crew to say, oh, P flag just came down minutes ago. As you get better at that, you'll actually have tacticians on the boat who will do that for you and say minutes ago, and we're 10 seconds late, or we're 10 seconds early. We need to burn a little bit of time. So again, these are things, this is professional racers are still getting better at this. This is something that you continue to do and continue to learn through your sailing career. All right. So once you're out on the race course, you don't get to just go wherever you want and expect people to get out of your way. So there are two really basic rights of way that we will talk about here. And there's a whole, I brought the racing rules of sailing here. I'll hold it up to the camera here so that we can, thank you. So we can show that there. This is something that the the U.S. Sailing, it is the new one, yeah. The U.S. Sailing puts out. It's available on U.S. Sailing's website for free, or you can buy the paperback for, I don't know, $20 or something like that. And it's based on the World Sailing rules with some modifications for the U.S. But most of these rules are the same the globe over. And there's, you see it's about, I don't know, 60 or 80 pages long. But the big rules that you're gonna see enacted or you're gonna have to adjust for are for port and starboard crossing situations, which we show on the left there. So we have the wind coming off the top of the screen, and boat A is on port, meaning that the wind is coming from their port side. You see their mainsails on their starboard side. Boat B is the opposite. Wind is coming from their starboard side. Their mainsail is on the port side, and because of that, B is considered the starboard boat, and port has to give way. So in that situation, as a tactical crossing, B is a happy camper there, and A not so much, because they're going to have to duck behind boat B, and they're going to lose 1 or 2 boat lengths probably in that maneuver. So if those boats, they might have started at the exact same time, one went right, one left. They had to, they tacked back and they crossed, and B won out, even if they were pretty evenly matched, just by having that nose in front and forcing A to get out of their way. I'll let you do windward leeward.
So windward leeward. And I know a lot of you already know all this stuff. This is stuff that's regular rules of the road that's out there anyway for just everyday sailing. When 2 sailboats are both under sail, they're both on the same tack, they're both on port, or they're both on starboard. The boat that's closer to the wind has got to give way. That is, and the other boat is the stand-on vessel. It's a maneuverability thing, and we always just try to remind people it's about the boat that is the most maneuverable has the least amount of rights. It's a good way to remember it and think through. And those rules apply on the race course as well. So all the way through the course, you still have to abide by the regular rules of the road out there.
Can you tell us why that boat is more maneuverable?
Oh my goodness. It's like pop quiz time. It's more maneuverable because the other boat will be in the shadow eventually, and that boat is getting the wind first. That's the best way I can.
That's not the answer I was going for.
Oh.
We can fight about this one later. But the way I learned it is that in a situation where you're both downwind, if you are the windward boat, if you're the windward boat, if you were to take the leeward boat down, you'd force them to jibe. And doing an uncontrolled jibe is dangerous. You don't want to put anybody in that situation. Yeah, well, sorry. But I mean, the rule extends for upwind too. But yeah, so a leeward boat can take a windward boat up, which would just mean they have to trim their sails. But the opposite, which would potentially cause a crash jibe, would be not so desirable. All right, so that's kind of really, really basic sailboat racing. If you guys have any questions, shout them out. But we'll get into a little bit more of PHRF, PERF, and handicapping. So PHRF, PERF is the Performance Handicap Racing Fleet. And some people say formula, but they call it fleet. I think both words are out there. And this is a handicap system where each boat is rated in a certain number of seconds per mile against, I don't even remember what the base boat is, but whatever 0 is. But most PERF handicaps are positive numbers. They're multiples of 3. And this is a rating that's assigned by a local racing committee. So MORF as a PERF organization, we assign our own PERF handicaps. LM PERF, which is the Lake Michigan PERF rating agency, provides handicaps for other races in Lake Michigan. And then there are PERF organizations all over the country. They're all coordinated by U.S. Sailing. So U.S. Sailing owns the trademark, and does some of the legwork on coordinating those numbers across different racing fleets. But fundamentally, the thing about PERF is that it's a performance, as in the first word, based rating system. When you're getting a rating assigned, you'll give information about your boat to the rating agency. and they'll look at your displacement and your length of your water line and the size of your sails, and the righting moment of your keel and all that kind of stuff. They'll try to compare it to other boats that have been racing already. But ultimately, we look at or perf agencies look at what the performance of those boats are. So if you have a boat that is similarly rated to a current production model, they'll look at those current ratings and what the performance of those racers were in different venues. So you assume that the boat's clean, that it's well maintained, that it has a competent crew, and then you try to set a handicap that matches up against that based on those boat parameters. But what you'll see sometimes, especially with newer production boats, is there's not a lot of racing data for them yet. So you'll see some of those numbers can vary year to year. So you might do your best try and give a rating that you think is accurate, but you'll find out that that boat's got a good crew and they can't win races against similar boats because their handicap isn't really accurate. It should be a little bit higher than it's been assigned, or they're blowing the doors off anybody and they're brand new to the boat and they don't really know how to sail, and like maybe it's wrong in the other direction. So you'll see those kinds of changes that happen in the first few years of a production boat, or a boat that maybe has been in production but hasn't been in that local racing scene. So boats that came, that are active on the East Coast but haven't been active in the Great Lakes, you might see some changes early on. So the ratings are subject to appeal, either by the rating agency or the boat owner or the boat's competition, depending on which way they want that rating to go. And ultimately, it ends up being, it can be a little bit political, but it's based on the actual results of the racing. And the nice thing about having this owned by U.S. Sailing is that perf ratings are pretty cheap. They're probably the simplest rating system out there, but they're also the least expensive. Morph provides a rating for free as part of our racing fee and our dues. And other agencies do it for a pretty low cost. We'll see some of the other options can be more expensive, and they have pros and cons as well. So compared to perf, we have some other things that other kinds of handicaps. So most of the other handicaps out there, perf's been around the longest, but more recently we've had these velocity prediction rules, and these have come out with the advent of better computing power. These are highly analytical, finite element analysis type tools that look at the hull shape and the sail configuration and a lot more mathematics and physics to try to turn this model of a boat in a computer program and say, this is exactly how fast it can go in these conditions, and run it for all the different conditions that you might find yourself sailing in, whether it's heavy winds or heavy waves or reaches or beats or dead runs. And there's a few of them out there. The big ones in Chicago are ORR, which had been run by Chicago Yacht Club for a long time, and now they just moved to ORC. And these are smaller applications, more narrow in scope usually. So there are different, like I said, there are different rules. Different yacht clubs, different racing organizations pick different ones. So the size of the fleets that are applicable are usually a little bit smaller than compared to a perf rating. And because it's kind of a captive audience and because it's proprietary, they're usually a little bit more expensive as well. Again, these are mathematical formulas, so you don't appeal these. You just get your rating and that's it. And there are various levels of accuracy. Some will argue that the advanced physics of those formulas give a better rating, a more accurate rating. Others will say that there's politics involved there too. But ultimately, it's handicapping these boats is an imperfect science. They're always going to be wrong somehow. Different boats will be favored in different weather. I mean, I know when we race, if it's if we're on a 60-degree reach and in 10 knots and we can put up our number one jib and the J105 is stuck with their number 3 or trying to lean over on their ear with an A sail up, we're going to beat them on that leg every time. Yeah, but the wind goes up or goes closer to the bow, then they're going to they're going to be faster than we are. So even if you had two boats that were, competitive in most conditions, when you get into individual races, you'll see that one boat is usually favored over another because of those conditions. The other thing too is that we don't, in our experience in Morph, it's rare that we see races come down to a few seconds. So even if your rating's not quite right, there's usually things on the boat that you could have done to go a little bit faster. Does anybody here golf? Show of hands. No, I know you guys do. Yeah, but I liken it to I golf, but really poorly. And I liken it to the kind of person who goes out and spends $300 on a new driver every year when they'd be a lot better off spending $50 on a golf lesson and a bucket of balls. So there's always things at our level of competition. Let's be realistic. We're not professional racers. There's always things on the boat that we can do better. And that it's going to be more impactful than getting another 3 seconds in our handicap rating. So, these velocity prediction programs and even Perf itself, they're not perfect, but they do what we can so that we can have different boats racing against each other in a competitive way that brings in as many different competitors as possible.
And fun to be out there by yourself.
Yeah. And then, so one design classes are the alternative to handicap systems. I'll let you talk a little bit about that since you do some one design.
Yeah. So you may have heard us mention that there is also one design racing here in Chicago. I race on a J105. That's, you've probably heard us say that a couple of times as well. The one design racing is a little less complex as far as these mathematical equations are concerned, but it's just as much fun racing. The nice thing is it takes out it's the same boat. Everyone has the same equipment. Everyone has the same style of boat, and theoretically, it's about the racers then. There's of course variations, but the rules in particular, and every class has its own rules. In the 105 series, for example, one of our rules is we have to have a deck run mainsail. You see these newer sails out there, and we do not get to use that for our mainsail. So that just happens to be one of the rules, and each class in each area makes up those rules. But it is really fun. I mean, it makes for a great start line. The photo you saw earlier in the thing is, there's a whole bunch of 105s all starting, and we're all doing the same thing. And it does make you recognize some of the things a little faster, I feel like, but we still go out and race more. It's a great way for us to get out on the water and spend time racing. And we get rating from Perf for that as well. So we still get to compete in all of those races as well.
All right. So available venues. So I've got, we're here representing Morph, Midwest Open Racing Fleet. In the Chicago area, you also have individual yacht clubs that host their own events. 5 of those yacht clubs are part of the Chicago Area Sail Racing Association, or CASRA. So that's where the majority of racing happens in Chicago, is across these fleets and these clubs. So for us, we have that racing circle that I showed you before, that Olympic circle of 9 buoys near Burnham Harbor, a couple of miles east offshore. We have about 40 boats. We do all Perf racing, so we do not have any one design classes. And we're a non-for-profit organization. We have one fee for all of our races, which is about 30-something races in the summer. So we focus on all, our kind of our bread and butter. While we do have the J105s and we have Beneteau 36.7s and some other classic one design fleets or boats in our fleet, we have a lot of what you would call Perf boats, a lot of kind of a mixed match of different models and configurations. So where we really try to draw from is for those racer cruisers or older model boats that might not have as many sister ships on the lake these days. We have a racing venue for anyone. So if it's your first boat or the boat you've had for 30 years, it's a good venue for all of these different unlike boats to be able to come together and have a big enough fleet to be competitive. So one of the things that's beneficial about having a large perf fleet is that you can have a narrow range in ratings in your competition. So you can imagine if you only had 5 boats racing with handicaps and you had some really fast late model boats and some, slower, smaller, older boats, those boats aren't going to be very competitive on a handicap system, no matter how good the handicap system is. So it's nice to be able to have similar size boats, similar speed boats, because those handicaps will be more accurate relative to one another. So that's one of the positives of having an organization like Morph for that kind of racing. So then you have the yacht clubs, which are those yacht clubs organize races individually. CASRA coordinates a lot of that racing in Chicago, but you still register and pay your fees to through yacht scoring, but to individual clubs, and they're responsible for their own sailing instructions and race committees and all that. These clubs in Chicago tend to focus on one design first. They often have handicap racing sections or fleets in their race, but it's a small percentage of that fleet. So, just for the purpose of this presentation, I looked up the 2019 Verve Cup, and the Verve Cup in Chicago had about 100 boats in it, and 16 of them were in an ORR handicap fleet. So while 100 boats is impressive, I really hope this horn's not coming up on our YouTube video. But well, it's nice to have 100 boats in a race. It's great to have that many boats out on a starting line or on a circle. If you've only have 15 boats in your handicap section, and of that, I think there were 3 different handicap sections. So you really only race maybe 3 to 5 boats that you're competing against. That's not quite as exciting. So where Morph has really benefited and had that strong perf fleet, the yacht clubs and the one design focus has kind of left those sorts of boats out in the cold. There's not as much competition in those areas for a boat that isn't in a competitive one design fleet. So here's just a little map of venues in Chicago. So I've got starting with the Morph circle there. We share that circle with Columbia Yacht Club. It's also where they do their Wednesday night beer can racing, and their Wednesday night beer can racing is handicap racing with perf ratings. Jackson Park Yacht Club does Wednesday nights down on the south side of Chicago. Chicago Corinthian on the north side does Wednesday nights. They also do some weekend racing. They also have a very competitive smaller boat fleet, Rhodes 19s and Vanguards, and I forget, Solings, I think. But they do some perf racing up in Chicago Corinthian. And then last you have CASRA, and CASRA bounces around a little bit in terms of actual location of their venues for their races, but they're pretty commonly out by that SA3 area, just east of Navy Pier. But you have different venues all up and down the lakefront, depending on where your boat is and where you can get to. It's more feasible for some folks to get south or get north if they want to come from a further away harbor. But if you're on a smaller boat where that's going to be more of a slog, maybe it's not as available to you. So that's it. We've got just to kind of recap. So for safety equipment, you want to have a PFD, you want to know your equipment, and then protect your points of contact. That's your hands and your feet. So buy those sailing gloves, wear appropriate footwear. For the elements of the race, we could have 10 seminars on that. We tried to give you guys the very high level introduction to a race. But for people who are watching who may be intimidated, haven't done their first race or haven't done their first race as skipper, we are very open. Morph is very open to helping you get comfortable with that. We'll have the conversations in the bar. We'll bring you out on our boat so that you can race with people who've done it before and can teach you. We'll put crew on your boat if that helps. We want to be able to bring more people into the sport of sailing. And then if you are new to this and you're thinking about getting out there for your first start, it can help if you can get one of your dock mates to go out with you on their boat and do some mock starts or mark roundings or something like that to practice a little bit. get you comfortable with sailing in close quarters. Because if you're just a cruiser, you probably get nervous when you're within 100 yards of a boat. It's a little bit different on the racing circle, but like anything else, it comes with experience. We gave you the basic right away, but as you get more serious, you're going to want to look at the racing rules sailing that U.S. Sailing provides, and then we introduced PERF and some of the other OR, ORC, some of the other venues, and talked about one design racing as well. And if you're familiar with the old maxim, all models are wrong, but some are useful. The same applies to handicaps. No handicap will be perfect, but some of them get close enough so that we can have, my Olsen 34 and Ann's J105 compete against each other and have fun out there. And then for racing venues, obviously we're pitching Morph, but Kazra is also around. LMSRF, the Lake Michigan Sail Racing Federation, is not a racing organization, but they do compile a lot of these schedules and the links to different clubs. So you can check that out and find links to racing in your area for your boat. Last thing, if you want to whip out your smartphone and scan that code, we will send you a resource sheet, and you can ask for more information about Morph, whether as a crew or as a boat owner. And we don't spam you or anything. We don't share your emails or any of that stuff. So we'll be happy to start a conversation and bring you into Morph. And even if you're not sure about doing it this summer, or we'll just engage in the conversation and see what we can do. Because I know, the reason Ann and I are up here is because we just love getting people involved in sailboat racing and sailing at all, or just getting out on the water. So, and our whole organization is filled with people like that. So not just us, but any number of people will be willing to help and get you acclimated to sailing in Chicago and getting you out on the race course. Any questions from anyone? No questions? All right. Thanks.